Welcome to Fusion Spectra. Tonight's story follows. The Rock discovers his lost love. Noel, thought dead for decades, is alive and has been waiting for him. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. The McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard buzzed with the usual chaos of late-night orders. The Rock had just ducked in unnoticed, by most craving nothing more than a quick coffee. But then the twins appeared, two small black children, no older than 6, standing side by side in matching hoodies, their eyes wide and glistening. They whispered something to him, just 3 words. His face froze, the color draining. A tremor passed through his hand, and the coffee cup slipped shattering at his feet. Rock wasn't a man easily shaken at 59. With decades of fame and heartbreak behind him, he built a quiet resilience that helped him survive in a world that had given him both fortune and devastating loss. But something about the way the children stared at him, their heads tilted just so, made his throat tighten. "Sir, the older of the two?" the girl said softly, her voice trembling as if she were on the verge of tears. "We need to talk to you, please. It's about her." "Her who are you?" Rock managed his voice barely above a whisper. The restaurant around them seemed to fade, the hum of orders and laughter dulling, as if the moment were sealed off from reality. He crouched down to their level, his eyes scanning theirs for answers. "We don't have much time." The boy, a mirror of the girl, whispered urgently. "She told us to find you." She said you'd understand." Rock swallowed hard. Who told you?" The girl's lip quivered. "We don't know her name, but she's trapped. She said you were the only one who could save her." Rock chest tightened. The air in the restaurant felt thinner, heavier, save her from what his voice cracked. The twins exchanged a glance, their expressions suddenly solemn. The boy leaned in, his voice barely audible as he whispered, "The fire, the one from 1993. And there it was that year. Rock's head snapped back as if struck. That fire had haunted him for years, though the public knew little about it. It was the year he'd been filming in Seattle, the same year an old house on the outskirts of the city burned to the ground under strange circumstances. He hadn't thought about it in decades. But now the memories came flooding back. The news reports, the rumors, the dreams a young woman had died in that fire. Or had she? Rock felt the blood drain from his face. Who are you?" he repeated, his voice shaking now. The girl reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small object. It gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the McDonald's. A locket, tarnished, its chain frayed, but unmistakable. Rock breath hitched as he recognized it instantly. It was hers. The whispers around him grew louder again, the chatter of the McDonald's patrons, oblivious to the storm unraveling inside him. The twins stepped closer, their voices in unison now, eerily calm. "You have to come with us tonight. If you don't, she'll be gone forever." Rock stood slowly, his legs unsteady. His mind raced. Who were these children? How did they know about the fire, about her? And why, after all these years, was this happening now? "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice sharp. Despite the tremor beneath it, the girl shook her head. "They're gone," she said simply. "Like she'll be if you don't hurry." Rock hesitated, glancing around the restaurant. No one else seemed to notice the tension crackling in the air around them. His gut told him to walk away, that this was insane, but something in the twins' eyes, a strange, haunting familiarity, rooted him in place. The boy tugged at his sleeve. "Please," he said, "she's waiting." Rock mind flashed back to the locket, the last time he'd seen it, clutched in her hand as she whispered his name. And then the fire roaring to life, swallowing everything. The boy's voice broke through his thoughts. "We don't have much time." Rock exhaled shakily. All right, he said, his voice firming. Take me to her. The twins smiled faintly, their relief palpable. Without another word, they turned and walked toward the door, their steps eerily synchronized. Rock followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Outside, the air was crisp, the streets oddly quiet for Los Angeles. The twins led him to a rusted black van, parked haphazardly near the curb. The windows were tinted, and the license plate was missing. Rock hesitated, every instinct screamed at him to stop, to turn back, but before he could speak, the girl opened the van's back door. She's inside, she said, her voice steady now, almost cold. Rock peered into the darkness of the van. At first, he saw nothing, just shadows, but then a faint sound reached his ears. It was a woman's voice, distant and trembling, whispering his name. Rock, his blood ran cold. It was her voice. It had to be. Before he could move, the twins stepped behind him. The girl placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly firm for someone so small. Once you step inside, she said, there's no going back. Rock turned to look at her, his heart hammering. Who are you? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl tilted her head, her eyes dark and unreadable. You already know, she said, you just don't remember. And then before he could respond, the boy gave him a slight shove, sending him stumbling into the van's darkness. The door slammed shut behind him. The twins' faces vanishing in the sudden void inside. The air was suffocating, thick with the smell of smoke and something faintly metallic. Rock eyes struggled to adjust, but the whispers grew louder, echoing around him. Rock, you shouldn't have come. The van began to move, the hum of its engine, drowning out the sound of his own racing heartbeat. Rock reached for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at his chest as he turned his eyes, finally adjusting to the dim light, and then he saw her, or what was left of her. The van jolted as it sped down the empty streets, the city lights flickering through tiny cracks in the walls. Rock breath hitched as he turned fully toward the figure sitting in the shadows. His hands trembled as he stepped closer, every nerve in his body urging him to stop. But something stronger pulled him forward. She was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hair, once vibrant and full of life, hung limp around her face. Obscuring it, she rocked slightly. Her movements uneven like a fragile doll, barely held together. And when she spoke, her voice sent a chill down his spine. You promised you'd find me, she whispered. Rock's throat tightened that voice. It cut through him like glass. No, he muttered, shaking his head. No, this isn't possible. The figure looked up then, and Rock stumbled back, his body colliding with the van wall. Her face, it was her, but it wasn't. The contours were the same, the eyes just as deep and dark as he remembered, but her skin was pallid, almost translucent, and her cheeks were hollow, like someone drained the life from her. Her eyes were rimmed with something red, as though she hadn't slept or cried for years. It's me, she said, her voice breaking the words, shaking like leaves caught in a storm. Rock, it's me. Rock legs gave out, and he fell to his knees. You're dead, he whispered, his voice cracking. I saw the reports. I saw the fire. You didn't. He stopped, his heart hammering as he tried to keep the memories at bay. The fire had been an accident, or at least that's what they said. The house had gone up so quickly there was no time for anyone inside to escape. But now, sitting in front of him was her, the woman he had loved, the woman he had lost. She shook her head slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. You didn't save me, she said, her voice trembling. You left me no Rock, whispered, his voice breaking. No, I didn't. I tried. I swear. I tried. The memories came rushing back unbidden. He'd been late that night, caught up on set, his phone dead by the time he reached the house. Flames had consumed it. He'd stood there, frozen helpless as firefighters held him back. He'd called her name until his throat was raw, but there was no answer. Now she was here sitting inches away from him, and the weight of it was crushing. I didn't leave you, he repeated, tears welling in his eyes. I couldn't save you, but I didn't leave you. Her expression softened, and for a moment, he thought he saw the woman he used to know, the one who used to laugh with him, who made him believe in something more than the empty life fame often brought. But then her eyes darkened again. They're coming for me, she whispered, her voice suddenly low, as if she were afraid someone might hear her. Rock, you don't understand. They're coming for me. And this time, you can't let them take me. His stomach churned. Who, he asked. His voice barely audible. Who's coming for you? The van swerved suddenly, throwing him off balance. He grabbed onto the side to steady himself as the woman turned her head sharply toward the front of the van. Her breathing grew shallow. Panicked. They don't want me to tell you, she whispered. They don't want you to know what happened that night. Rock pulse raced. What are you talking about? Who doesn't want me to know? She reached out suddenly, her icy fingers wrapping around his wrist. He flinched but didn't pull away. Her touch was fragile, like she might shatter if he moved too quickly. You have to remember, she said, her voice urgent now. Rock, think about that night. Think about what you saw, what you heard. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a fire. His mind reeled. He'd spent years trying to bury the memories of that night, convincing himself that it was out of his control. But now doubt crept in like a shadow, twisting his stomach. What do you mean? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What are you saying? Her grip tightened, and for the first time, there was fear in her eyes. They killed me, Rock, she said, her voice breaking. They killed me, and they're not done. They'll come for you, too. Before he could respond, the van screeched to a halt, throwing him forward. The doors flew open, and the twins stood there, silhouetted against the streetlights. But something about them was different now. Their eyes, once filled with childish innocence, were dark, hollow. It's time, the girl said, her voice devoid of emotion. Rock turned back to the woman, but she was fading, her form flickering like a dying light. Don't let them take me, she whispered. One last time, her voice a broken plea. Please, Rock, remember. And then she was gone. Rock's chest heaved as he scrambled to his feet. Feet, what did you do to her? He shouted at the twins, his voice raw. The boy tilted his head, a small, eerie smile creeping across his face. You already know, he said, echoing the girl's earlier words. You just don't remember. Rock stepped out of the van, his heart racing. The street was empty, the night air cold against his skin. He turned back to the twins, but they were gone. The van, vanishing with them. He stood there alone, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a stone. They killed me. The phrase echoed in his mind over and over, refusing to be silenced. Who were they, and why couldn't he remember? His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him back to reality. He pulled it out with shaking hands, an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello, a familiar voice crackled through the line, soft but unmistakable. Rock. She said, it's not over, and then the line went dead. Rock stood frozen. The phone still pressed to his ear, even though the line had gone dead. The street was eerily silent, the only sound his own shallow breathing. He whispered her name under his breath, his voice cracking. Noel. It was the first time he'd said it aloud in years. The name felt heavy on his tongue, laden with memories he wasn't sure he could bear. Noel, she had been everything his world before fame swallowed him whole. She had known him before the movies, before the red carpets, back when he was just a lanky, wide-eyed kid trying to figure out who he was. And then, in one night, she was gone, lost to the fire, lost to the chaos. He'd never been able to shake the guilt, the nagging feeling that he should have been there sooner, that he could have saved her. Rock stood in front of Noel, his heart racing, the years of grief and doubt, collapsing into a single moment of truth. She was here, she was real Noel. He whispered, his voice trembling. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. I never stopped waiting for you, she said softly. Rock took her hands, feeling the warmth, the reality of her presence. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of the past lift. I thought I lost you, he murmured, his voice breaking. No, she replied, shaking her head. I've always been here just hidden, waiting for you to find me. And in that quiet, restored moment, Rock knew their love wasn't lost. After all, there was time, time to heal, time to rebuild. No matter the years that had passed, their story wasn't over, it was only just beginning.